We are back with episode 4 of the Sea of Monsters. I hope everyone had an amazing holiday. I apologize for this video being pushed back a bit, but I wanted to focus on my family for Christmas, especially because this is actually my son's first Christmas, so it was an exciting time for us. But anyway, I'm back, so let's break this episode down. I'm going to point out hidden details, look at how this episode compares to the book, and just give my thoughts and review it as we go. It's what we've been doing for the last few weeks, so you know the deal. Also, if you can't tell from my voice, I'm a little bit sick. I actually haven't spoken for the entire day up until now because I was saving my voice, but I think it still sounds a little weird. Just letting you know, if I sound weird, that's why. If you enjoy this video, please consider liking and sharing. It will greatly help to grow and sustain the channel. And if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button, and you can also follow me on all of my other social media pages, all of which are linked down below, and all of which house similar content that I make here on this channel. Now, let's get into it. The episode title is Clarisse Blows Up Everything, which is taken right from the title of Chapter 11 in the Sea of Monsters book. To start, the first shot shows Annabeth using her knife, which fits perfectly into what this episode focuses on, which is the flashbacks of her being young. In the book, this knife was actually given to her by Luke when he and Thalia first found her as a little girl. They don't actually show that in this episode though, but this knife plays a major role in the final book, so I hope we get more focus on it sometime later. Instead of the knife, this episode prioritizes the bracelet that Luke gave Annabeth, which was from a box of Monster Donut cereal. This is a cool reference because this was mentioned in the book, but in a very different way. When Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson are at one of Luke and Thalia's old hideouts, they realize that right next to them, there's a donut shop that was being run by monsters. And Tyson actually went and bought a box, which he was able to do because he was technically a monster himself. Then when a fight broke out, in the book, this is when Clarisse shows up and she saves them, and she then has them join her on the CSS Birmingham. And that's very different than what happened in this episode, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, back to the bracelet. Instead of Luke gifting her the knife, he gives this to her and tells her that monsters couldn't get to her if she was wearing it, which is kind of a wild thing to say because obviously that's not true, so he's setting her up for failure. This bracelet is of course what the showrunners used to have Annabeth go off on her own, leading to her getting captured by 3 Cyclops. Cyclops are a big deal for Annabeth's arc in the book because she hates them and blames them for Thalia not making it as they slowed them down. But from what we've seen, it looks like that won't be the case in the show. But that's why Annabeth was actually hesitant about Tyson at first, because he was a Cyclops. Then we get a badass moment where Thalia arrives to save Annabeth. Thalia is played by Tamara Smart, who I think is amazing in the role. And I love that Thalia is going to have a British accent. I'm so glad that they didn't have her change her natural voice.
And I don't want anything to do with my father's world.
We also get to see Thalia use Aegis, which is a bracelet that's able to turn into a shield. And we see that it has the face of Medusa on it, just like in the novels. Aegis was a shield used by Zeus, who obviously is Thalia's father, but the one that Thalia has is actually a copy of the original, so it's not the real one. And we also see Thalia use her spear and channel lightning through it, which is another awesome thing taken right from the book. These flashbacks also show us the beginnings of the relationship between Annabeth and Luke, and seeing this, it makes it more clear why Annabeth was so adamant on saving Luke in the last episode rather than taking him down like Percy wanted to. I was also fascinated by the way that Thalia looked at Annabeth, which has an interesting contrast to Luke. Luke wants to keep moving and doesn't want to go to camp as he thinks he can protect Annabeth. But Thalia sees that that might not be the case, and she ultimately makes the decision to get the young Annabeth to Camp Half-Blood.
So if the safest place for you is this camp, that's where our family's going.
I also love how Luke called it Cult Half-Blood. That was a cool detail.
And all we have to do is join Cold Half-Blood.
We hear Thalia say that Luke has a history with camp.
Luke and your camp have history.
This line gives us a lot to unpack, and this is something that the episode didn't actually cover at all. The history that Luke has with camp before this is the fact that when he was a baby, his mother May tried to become the new Oracle of Delphi. But this didn't work, and it instead gave her the power to see her son's tragic fate, and this drove her mad. And his mother being in this state was a big reason why Luke ran away from home. Now, whether that's what they're referencing, I'm not sure. Given how much has been changed from the book, it's possible that the show will actually add the fact that Luke resided at camp before going on the run. But I guess time will tell. Overall though, I really enjoyed these flashbacks, and it was amazing getting our first glimpse of Thalia. A lot of this was not in the Sea of Monsters book, but rather was revealed 3 books later in The Last Olympian, the final book in the series. We saw them do something similar to this in season 1, as they divulged huge details about these plot lines in the Lotus Casino episode.
You were there last time I saw Luke.
Yes, I saw you argue. I heard what he said. That what happened to his mom was your fault. That it was all your fault.
So they're clearly jumping ahead with some plot lines, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. I'll have to let it play out before I form an opinion. We get a nice Percy and Tyson moment at the beginning of the episode, which was really sweet. That is, until Clarisse breaks it up by blowing up their boat, which I guess gives the title to the episode. Seeing Percy and Clarisse battle it out was exciting, and that line that Percy says before the fight is such a Percy thing to say.
Single combat. Same way I beat your dad.
However, this scene belongs to Annabeth, as she uses her invisibility cap, which her mother gave her, to stab the 3 most important members of Clarisse's crew, forcing her to turn to them instead. Also, a great detail in the flashbacks was the fact that Annabeth was wearing a New York Yankees shirt, which of course matches her invisibility hat, which was also for the New York Yankees. This move by Annabeth was brilliant, which is a big focus in this episode and something that I really enjoyed. Annabeth in the books is a literal genius. Unfortunately though, I feel like the show hasn't really utilized that aspect of her character enough. But fortunately, this episode sort of makes up for that. Clarisse calls her smart girl.
And don't even try to lecture me on the rules, smart girl.
Which is actually a line taken right from the book, which is cool. And in this episode, Annabeth lives up to that title, first by making Clarisse have no choice but to have them join her. Then we find out that she's memorized everything to do with the Sea of Monsters, which is just so book Annabeth.
I've memorized every legend about the trials you'll have to face out there.
And later, we see just how true this is, as she spouts off tons of knowledge about the Sea of Monsters.
The Sea of Monsters doesn't work like that. If you try to sail around them, they'll appear in your path again.
And she even comes up with a plan to have Scylla use all of its arms when grabbing 6 members of Clarisse's crew, which Percy says is brilliant.
That's brilliant.
Also, I think it was a hilarious bit that Percy didn't know how to pronounce Charybdis.
We either have to fight the Scylla or...
Charybdis.
I know how to pronounce it. Why don't we just sail around Scylla and... the thing I know how to pronounce.
On the opposite end though, this episode develops Annabeth's reliance on her brain power not being enough. She says she wants to think 6 steps ahead so she could save Percy, but that wasn't enough to outthink the million other choices that she can't see.
If I can just think 6 steps ahead, I can save you. But it's never gonna be the big impossible choice I have to outthink. It's all the million little choices I can't see.
Percy and Annabeth's relationship is something that I continue to enjoy in this season. The scene we just went over was a nice one, as Annabeth shows how much she wants to protect Percy. Then in another scene, Annabeth snaps at Percy about choices.
How do you know it's the right choice?
Of course, referring to the prophecy, which will eventually lead to Percy either making a choice that will save Olympus or destroy it. However, Percy takes this on the chin and shows how much trust he has in Annabeth.
Honestly? Because it's yours.
And one of my favorite lines from this episode was when Annabeth was blaming herself for Thalia's downfall, all for a girl who Thalia only knew for 2 months.
Or sacrificing yourself for a kid you barely know.
And Percy has the perfect response to this.
She knew you better than that.
2 months.
It only took me 2 days to see how special you were.
The scene then ends with Percy helping her up and they stare into each other's eyes, holding each other's hands. Also, this scene houses another one of my favorite lines where Percy says,
And I'm not bragging, but my track record at surviving impossible odds is pretty good.
Which again is something that Percy from the book would absolutely say, and I love it. Some other cool details in this episode was Grover talking about Pan,
The rune of Pan, lost god of the wild.
who he was of course searching for before getting captured. And I also loved Percy automatically knowing where they were in the ocean, plus how fast they were going.
I wonder how close we are to the Sea of Monsters.
130 nautical miles.
How do you know that?
Oh, we're moving at 23 knots, 36 degrees, 44 minutes north. Hold on. How do I know that?
And the moment where he thanks his dad with a soft smile on his face was so wholesome.
Thanks.
I also love the bit with Tyson and the bracelet. He tells Annabeth that he's playing with Rainbow, and then when Annabeth throws the bracelet back in the ocean, we see a hippocampus dive down to get it. I'm assuming that this is the hippocampus that Tyson befriended in the book, who he named Rainbow. In the book, Rainbow and other hippocampi took them to the Princess Andromeda, and when they didn't show up in episode 2 as they took a boat instead, I assumed we would not see them. So I'm excited that Rainbow actually will be in the series after all. Now, we have to talk about Clarisse. I love Clarisse in this season, but this just straight up is not Clarisse from the book. This is an entirely different character, and honestly, I'm not mad about it. The show continues to humanize her, and this Clarisse has a lot more compassion than book Clarisse. I was actually able to interview Dior, who plays Clarisse, when I went to the Percy Jackson set in Vancouver, and she told me about how this Clarisse would be different, and I'm starting to see that more and more.
What I'm most excited about in terms of like her expansion as a character is we get to actually see her as a fully actualized human being. She goes through this arc where there's a whole lot of self-discovery happening. You understand her reasons why now. She's not just like mean for no reason. You're like, oh, okay, kind of clocking it, yeah.
That actually just made me so excited to see more of Clarisse.
It's very cool. I just really hope, I just pray that I did her justice and that I served the story and I served the fans well.
Dior's version of Clarisse is way less selfish, and we see her struggle mightily with her crew. She promised them Elysium, and she fully wants to fulfill that promise. And we see this affect her even more when her whole crew volunteers for a dangerous mission when she needs them.
We will follow you anywhere, Captain.
You can just see the guilt on her face. And again, as I've been saying all season, it really softens her character. She has to choose between glory in fulfilling her quest or betraying the men that she promised. And this gets even more intriguing when you think about the fact that these men are already dead. Even Annabeth didn't care about them, stabbing them without a second thought.
You killed them? They were already dead, so not really.
Ultimately, Clarisse makes the choice to sacrifice them, and we get a powerful moment when she looks into the eyes of her leader just before he gets snatched. And at that moment, she realizes that she can't do this and goes back on her original decision. And that talk she had with Percy was another thing that really intrigued me. She actually asks Percy of all people for advice.
How did you do it? Last year, your quest, how did you survive it?
Would have died if it weren't for my friends.
And his answer of needing friends puts her down a lot, knowing that she doesn't really have any. The line about her not having anywhere to go besides camp really heightens the reasons behind her wanting to succeed on this quest.
I don't go home at the end of the summer. Camp is home. If I can't get that fleece in
that won't
camp...
happen.
She wants to succeed so she can protect the only home she has. Percy then sympathizes with her for having Ares as a father.
I imagine your dad must be pretty tough to have as a dad. I say that having been body slammed by him.
Also, this is yet another amazing line from Percy that book Percy would absolutely say. Honestly, dude, shout out to the writers for nailing his dialogue in this episode. But circling back, the Clarisse from the book would never have a heart-to-heart like this with Percy, at least not to the extent of getting so vulnerable. The only moment that we really feel for Clarisse in the book is when Percy overhears a conversation that she had with her father, where he was pretty tough on her. But that's nothing compared to everything they've added to her character in this season. The motivations, the insecurities, and the loyalty she has go so much deeper. Completing this quest isn't just for her, it's for everyone she cares about, even if all of those people don't always care for her. And then probably the most significant moment for Clarisse in this episode was running to save Annabeth, which was a moment that I thought was a great addition. And the way the two girls look at each other afterwards, it's clear that they've bonded and almost care for the other. And this is yet another thing that separates this Clarisse from book Clarisse. The use of the thermos in the sequence was pretty brilliant, having that actually be the thing that blew the ship up. Then at the end, the way Clarisse and Annabeth got sucked up, I don't know how they're going to survive this one. I'm curious how they'll explain that, because they look super dead. In the book, they actually escaped on a lifeboat, and Percy was actually taken by Scylla. But both the episode and the chapter whose name the episode got its title from end in the same way, as we have no idea what happened to anyone. What a cliffhanger. As I've been doing for every episode for both season 1 and season 2 at this point, I'm going to rate this episode out of 10. Overall, I thought that this episode was great for character development, especially for Annabeth and Clarisse. As I stated, I'm glad that they're really leaning into Annabeth's brain power, because I think that's one of the best things about her in the book. I also think her expansion in the flashbacks with Luke and Thalia were well done, and I really like the way they parallel what's going on in present day. The flashbacks in general though were really well done, and it was absolutely amazing getting our first look at Thalia. Then, as I stated, I just love this version of Clarisse. I hated Clarisse in the book, but this version of her is just so likable. But at the same time, she still has qualities that book Clarisse has. I think I'm going to give this episode a 9 out of 10. This season just keeps rolling, and I'm loving it. And just really quickly, now that we're on episode 4, I'll put out my ratings for all of the other episodes as well. If you haven't seen my reviews on these previous episodes, you can click here to check them out. And I will continue to cover this show every week for each episode that comes out. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of those videos. That's all I have for you guys in this video though. Thank God my voice made it through. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.